I have a confession to make. In fact, it's not something I typically will share with others, or they might debate about the state of my mental health. So here it goes. I have some of the best one-on-one consultations with myself in ladies' room mirrors. In fact, I'm my own one-person board of advisors. So join me, if you would, in a company restroom where I was a member of the sales team, and I had just lost a big sale. As you can imagine, I was feeling pretty low at that point. So, thumbnail about me at that moment. 35 years of working, 4 very different careers, the last 10 plus spent in sales. So losing a sale had a major impact on me in a variety of ways. Like many of you, I also was working 40 plus hours at work, then going home and working another 40 plus hours as wife, daughter, stepmother, grandmother, friend, community member. I had no life. I was exhausted. So here's how this conversation went. Really? So lost a big sale, and so now you're going to be like down for the next several days. You really need a life. In fact, what is your tombstone going to say? She worked. Honestly, you need to make some changes. The other side of my brain was saying, okay, so you leave the big job. So who will you be without the business card? When everyone else is working Monday through Friday, what will you be doing with your time? How about your purpose? How will you utilize your time and talents? Now, I don't have to tell you what side of the brain won out. So on went another coat of lipstick. Back to the office I went to work on the next sale. So, hindsight is 20/20, right? So I wish I knew then what I know now, and I hope that you will take away from this video. So grab some paper if you would, and I'll tell you at different times when to join me in writing some things down. So here are some of the things that I wish I had known. One, I wish I knew what was going on in my life at that moment. In other words, what role does changes and transitions make in a woman's life? What role does it play? Excuse me. And in dealing with transitions, what were some strategies that I could employ to help me better manage those periods? I would have loved to have known what living with intention or living an intentional life actually meant, and what were the 5 core things that I had to keep in mind as I was planning my own. And finally, like I'm sure many of you, I would have loved to know some action strategies that I could have taken at the day's end, go home to start working on my own intentional life. So before we go any further, I'd like to pause for a moment. I'd like to know a little bit more about all of you. I'm going to describe for you 2 different groups of women. And what I'd like you to write down is which group, either 1 or 2, describes your current mindset. Which group of women would you belong to? So group number 1 is a group of women who know that they still need to work, but they want to have work play a much different role in their lives. In fact, a much smaller role. At the same time, they want to look at all the different roles that they play and figure out how to recreate, redefine, repurpose them so that life can look a whole lot different than it does now. Group 2 knows that they are definitely looking at post-career, done with work. Some would say that's what they call that area called retirement. I don't like that term. But these are definitely women who are thinking about what's next. But when they think about 20 to 30 years that are possible in a post-career life, they want to run screaming from the room. In fact, they probably have put much more time thinking about the last 2-week vacation than they ever have planning for a 20 to 30 year period. So I know it's a very, very difficult time. So please make a note to say which one of those groups would you belong to. So here's the great news for all of you. You are not alone. Even as we speak, today there are millions of women out there thinking about what would or could my life look like if or when I left the big job, right? These are women who have fought long and hard for their place and where they are in their career or on the ladder. And now they're realizing, they've done it all. They've done career, they've done marriage, they've done motherhood possibly, all on high heels. And honestly, they're tired of the merry-go-round. They want to get off and live life on their own terms, or as I like to say, living an intentional life. So that being said, I've even coined a term for these women, and I call them WFOLI, women focused on living intentionally. These are the women that I coach. I'm Autumn Nestler, principal of An Intentional Life. The women I coach, upon realizing that they have decades of life left, have decided enough. They don't want to spend any more time thinking about what I do. They want to think about who I am, and especially with the life that they have left to live. So a lot of times people will say to me, when does a woman start to think about this idea that I need to do life differently? What happens? What's prompted this change in thinking? Quite simply, it is a change, some sort of change has happened. And by that, I mean, there's numerous types of changes that could have happened. The last child has left for college. She might have gotten laid off. Her marriage might have ended. She or her significant other might be dealing with significant health concerns. The list goes on and on. But all in all, some sort of change has happened that has had this kind of impact on her. The thing about changes, they can happen by opportunity. Think marriage, getting married. They can happen by choice. She decides to take on that new position that was offered to her. By natural endings, graduating from college. And finally, ones that are unwillingly imposed on us. Can we say pandemic? Now, before the pandemic, women have been going through changes. We've all been going through changes and periods of transition for many, many years. And we're still here to tell the story, right? So change has been with us for a long time. It's the only constant in our lives. So if you would, take a moment and write down, and I'll pause for a moment. Take a moment and write down, what is it that has got you, what change has happened that has gotten you to think about doing things differently with your life? Please take a moment to do that. If you need to, you can always pause the video so you have more time to kind of think through what has happened. I'll be here. So change can have an amazing impact. Amazing. It can prompt us to take major risk. It can take us to do things totally differently. It can get us to take significant action. All great things. But change always is accompanied by a period of transition. And that transition piece is that awkward space, could be a day, could be a week, could be a month, could even be years of what was is no longer than graduating from college. And what is to be has yet to be defined or has yet to happen. Think about getting that first full-time role, utilizing your brand new diploma. So transition, I also use that visual image of a tightrope walker. And you can visualize this person, right? This tightrope walker, where the first platform they're on is the ending, right? The graduating from college. And that getting that first new full-time role is across, and it's over there. But between here and there is this great abyss of space, or what I like to refer to as the gray zone. And there may or may not be a safety net underneath. Most of us try to avoid those transitions, that awkward space, that gray zone, at all costs. We're very uncomfortable with that. We're very uncomfortable with that not knowing and trying to get our arms around this period. And in fact, we'll do everything we can to avoid it. It makes us feel badly about ourselves as well. So when I work with a woman, the first thing that she and I start to do and talk about is looking at change very differently. And by that, I mean for her to see it as an opportunity, looking at it with openness and curiosity, being excited about what's yet to come, and being able to carve out that time to be in that gray zone, to just be. Not always to do, not always to get to that next platform, but just to be. Now, that's all great, but how does one navigate those transitions? Well, there's strategies that she and I work on together. And so here are 5 strategies. Again, Please jot down these notes so you can remember them later. And if you need to pause me, please do so. The first strategy is we get to transform our beliefs. And by that, I mean, if we think about it as women, we have done amazingly well with all the changes and transitions to date. We've done so with 100% success because we're here talking about it. So the first message I encourage her to give herself is, don't worry, I've got this. That's first. The second thing we talk about is reframing our perspective, her perspective. You know, as women, we should ourselves to death, okay? We should be the perfect employee. We should be always wanting to go up the corporate ladder. We should be the best wife, the best mother, the best community member, all and all and all. It is exhausting. How about putting ourselves first? Now, many times when I say to a woman, put yourself first, put me first, or when was the last time you did that? She gets very uncomfortable because a lot of people associate putting me first with being selfish. Now, I want you to think about those messages that we all get on airplanes, right? What do they say? Put your oxygen mask on first before you put it on your children. So in doing so, that is actually a very selfless act that you're doing in order to be able to survive and help your children survive. No different in thinking about putting our own lives first and putting ourselves first. We owe it to ourselves. We owe it to our families. We owe it to everyone to be better, the best we can be. The third thing that we talk about is invigorating our thinking. You know, I think about the power of phrases. So when I say to a woman, I want you to really think, sit back, really think outside the box for a moment and answer these questions or finish these phrases. What if I? Imagine if I could, and fill in those blanks. Just by starting those opportunities of quiet and thinking with those two phrases, you begin to recreate, repurpose, redesign, reimagine what could be. And you can apply those phrases to all the roles that you play currently, not just work. The fourth thing that we talk about is clarifying timing, right? Because, you know, this sounds like work, Autumn. I mean, when do I have the time to do this? You know, I talk with her about starting to put aside resources and time frames where she can do this kind of thinking. So my pushback, I guess, when she says that is, when do I have time, is if not now, then when? Because lastly, an intentional life or living with intention happens by design, not by default. So she really has to think through and take the time to do that for herself. Now, time to pause again. I'm going to ask you to reflect back. And if you don't have enough time and you want to continue through the video to put this for another time, please do so. But I'm going to ask you to think about some of the changes that you've been through to date and some of the strategies that you yourself used. Maybe you only use the strategy once, or maybe you use it on a continuous basis. But bottom line, it has served you well. So I want you to write some of those things down. And again, I'm going to take a moment to pause for a moment and let you, take that time to do that. But it's really important for you to think back on, what have I done before that I want to pull on at this point? Now, I know I'm not giving you a lot of time, so please, after we're done, grab a glass of wine, grab a cup of coffee, and continue. So join me, if you would, in another ladies' room, this time in an emergency room at a major hospital in Delaware. And this conversation went like this: that's it, I'm done, no more. How many times does this have to happen in order for me to wake up and do something different? And you might ask, what got you in that ladies' room, to that conversation, to that discussion you had with yourself. Well, imagine this. That day, my husband and I are sitting in front of our fireplace, cups of hot chocolate in our hand, blizzard roaring outside. The day before, we had celebrated his birthday with our grandsons, and in a couple days, we were actually going to be leaving for Florida. Now, fast forward, coming through that blizzard to an emergency room because my husband had had another heart event. Now, I will tell you, in all the years that we've been together, there had been many to that date and many since then. So this wasn't, as we say, our first rodeo. I'm sitting there, and as you can imagine, blizzard raging outside. I'm sitting there by myself with just the nurse at the nurse's station. The door from the back opens up, and out walks a priest. And he walks over to the nurse, and she looks up and points at me. Now, I'm the only one there. So you can imagine, as he's walking over, here's how that conversation went. I've lost him. It's done. My life as I knew it before will never, ever, ever be the same because this time I am not bringing him home. The priest finally makes it to my side and just wanted to let me know that, yes, my husband had had a heart attack and that they were still working on him and that the doctor would be out shortly to give me an update. That's what led me to that ladies' room. The difference was for this conversation, rather than the lost the sales conversation, this one, after I got him home and he was stable and we were back to a normal life, if you could call it that, that moment, that conversation led me to totally change everything. It led me to find a program that would enable me to map out and learn about living my own intentional life. It prompted me to take those steps necessary in order to start a coaching practice where I could help other women to do the same thing. I won't go into all the details that kind of happened between the event and where I am today, but suffice it to say that that discussion with myself was strong enough and prompted me and had the energy behind it to get me to rethink what life would look like. So like many of the women that I work with who have those kind of moments in their life, and like me at that moment, it was about making new life choices. And really that's what my clients and I work on together. And when I talk to them about what is an intentional life and how do you even begin to get your arms around something that we've not heard of before. Simply put, an intentional life is one in which you define for yourself a lifestyle that takes in all the different roles that you play, but it's lived on your own terms in a way that reflects your personal style, in a way that reflects your wisdom, your success, your experience to date. It's something that's just all about you and prompts you to be excited about every day that you wake up. That's what an intentional life is. Sounds great, right? But where does one even begin? So here's, again, pull out the piece of paper because I'm going to ask you to jot down a few things. Number one, the first thing that you need to do is realize that you don't have to start from scratch. In fact, the best thing about an intentional life plan is you're going to take the best of what you've learned to date, right? Lessons learned. You're going to look at all the things that have gotten you to the point where you are today, the things that make you who you are, that identify your own personal style, and you're going to put them to good use. And it's going to be wonderful because that's going to be the way your lifestyle is going to flow from this point forward. The second thing that you have to always remember is that everything that we do in life is a choice. Again, when you think about developing an intentional life, it is by design, not by default, that you're doing that. So remember that the choices that you are making are very important, and they are within your power. The third thing that you have to remember is that all of those choices, one of the things that's so critical to planning an intentional life is knowing what our beliefs and our values are. You know, they can serve, our beliefs and values can serve as that filter by which we look at all the choices, all the things that we're going to do, all the steps that we're going to take. You should always be true to yourself. You should always be true to your beliefs and values. So it's important to know that that's something you have to identify. And finally, of course, is, again, taking action. And knowing that, you know, by just staying there and thinking it's going to happen, it's not. It's all up to you and design work and time set aside to do that. So honor yourself. Honor this next phase of your life when you're transitioning from what I do to who I am, to put aside that time to do that. Now, I promised you that hindsight is 2020. So I want to kind of summarize a little bit about what we've been talking about thus far by taking you back to that first ladies' room where I had lost the big sale. And I'm going to kind of take you through what was on my mind at that point and some of the things that I was going through based on what I've shared with you. So first off, when we talk about change, the change that had happened, obviously, was losing the sale. Pretty major. And again, of course, at that time, as I shared with you, that all the roles that I played were like exhausting me. I was depleted. Excuse me. There was nothing much left in me. I also had to remember at that time, when I thought about my own beliefs, I had to take that opportunity, or should have taken that opportunity, to look back and say, wow, look at all the things that you've gotten through thus far and all the changes and transitions, right? You survived 4 different careers. You were married before, divorced, raising other people's children, getting married again, you know, the moves, all the things. And guess what? You did it. You know, I did it, and I'm still here to talk about it. And I should have said, I got this, no problem. Been there, done that, have the t-shirt, I can do this as well. The other thing I needed to do at that point was to really reframe my perspective. In other words, it's my time. It's now time to put me first. It's now time to honor that inner voice that is screaming to be heard. I needed to do that. Also invigorated my thinking. You know, if I had known those phrases, imagine if I, what would happen if I, think of how I could have recreated and reimagined and redesigned just an amazing time in my life. And of course, to take that opportunity to say, if not now, when, Autumn? And to hold my own feet to the fire and to move forward. So, taking action. I'm going to give you to conclude this video, I'm going to give you an activity, an exercise, whatever you want to call it, to do. I hope you will take some notes so you remember what we talked about. Because I have another story to tell you. So I love to have people gather at my table. I love it, right? Great food, friends, conversation. I just get so energized by it. I also have a reputation, much to my husband's dismay, that I always try new recipes. Now, 1 or 2 outcomes could happen because of doing that. We could have an amazing meal, right? That could be one outcome. Or we could be ordering pizza. But the bottom line is that if I've looked at this now as a recipe and planning an intentional life, kind of in the same way. As I mentioned to you, when you plan your intentional life, you're going to pull on the best ingredients of who you are today. And I think about that often when I'm planning a get-together, or when I'm now planning my own intentional life, which, by the way, I do on an annual basis. So the planning process happens every January. or I plan out the next 12 months. But if I think about that, planning that recipe and taking the best of the best, I knew that in planning my own intentional life, the ingredients that I had to put into it was I had to, and how my weeks or my days would pass, etc. I knew that I wanted to utilize my time and talents in some way, shape, or form. So some people would call that work. I knew that I wanted to create, and both personally as well as professionally, create new things. I definitely knew that I wanted to learn on an ongoing basis, that was important to me. Another ingredient that I needed to have was connection, because I absorb energy from other people. So I knew that connection on a daily, definitely a weekly basis was going to be paramount to the success of my intentional life plan. And certainly community, giving back, giving a part of myself. When I was so busy doing all those hours and doing all that crazy things, I didn't give back and volunteer and think about ways to do that as often as I should. But I knew that moving forward, my own intentional life had to have a part of that be set aside to give back to other people. So again, think about your own life. Think about the ingredients. Now, again, that's a big task when you think about planning a year like I did. But how about planning an ideal day? Take your ingredients, take the best things about you, think about what the ideal day would look like in living your life with intention. Grab yourself a cup of coffee, grab yourself a glass of wine or a cocktail, pull out a journal, and think about the ingredients that will go into the perfect day. What's the mixture look like? What do you need to gather in order to be able to live that ideal day? And I promise you, if you carve out the time to do that, you will be on your way to living your intentional life. Or you could go back to your desk and work on the next sale. Remember, the choice is yours. One of my favorite quotes that I'd like to leave you with is the best way to the best way to predict the future is to create it. Abraham Lincoln. I'm honored to have spent this time with you. I hope you will honor yourself and listen to that inner voice that's screaming to be heard. And always remember, and that final message that I want to leave you with is, remember, you've got this. Thank you again. Enjoy the rest of your day. And if you'd like to learn more, or if you'd like to have a one-on-one conversation with me to talk about what life might look like post-pandemic, I offer free clarity discussions. You can reach me by either emailing me at autumn@designretirement.org. Once again, it's autumn@designretirement.org. Or you can call me at 215-870-2960. Once again, that number is 215-870-2960. I'd love to assist you with living an intentional life. Thank you again. Enjoy the rest of whatever day you're having.